In this video, I'll be running through the concept and the application of decomposing ad spend or revenue into its parts so that you can understand where the optimal profit frontier is for your ad spend. The reality is 99% of business owners, 99% of performance marketers do not understand this concept. They particularly don't know how to go and apply it. And so almost everyone overspends to some degree. And so this video should immediately provide clarity on why you're probably overspending, and then how you can begin an exercise of decomposing your ad spend levels into their individual parts and measuring incremental returns, as opposed to having blended targets and just pushing losses through a bunch of customer acquisition. So what am I actually looking at here? Well, here's an example brand. And let's say that their target acquisition MER is a 6 and their target blended CAC is $16.67. Now, target blended CAC is just 1 divided by acquisition MER target times average order value. And so we've just assumed $100 average order value. So both of these things, they mean the same thing. If we hit this blended CAC, we're hitting this acquisition MER. If we hit this acquisition MER, we're hitting this blended CAC. Now what we have here is increments of ad spend. So I've started at $5,000 and then I've just worked my way down $1,000 at a time. And then what we have here is new customers being acquired at these different ad spend thresholds. Now you can actually pull a graph like this together just looking at historical data. So in months that we've spent $5,000, how many new customers did we acquire? In months that we spent 6, how many new customers did we acquire? Maybe we'd never spent 7 before, but we've spent 8. Okay, look at the middle. What do we predict 7K would have done? And you can start to build out this graph just based on historical data within the brand, as long as they've been around for a few years and they've had some variance within their ad spend. Now, when you do this, the numbers almost never come out clean. And so you'll need to smooth the numbers as they go up to get a bit of a better picture as to what scaling ad spend looks like at an incremental new customer level. But once you've done that, you should have something like this. Now, once you have these two columns, you can then just go and calculate acquisition MER and blended CAC out of them. Blended CAC is just ad spend divided by new customers. And then acquisition MER is new customers times average order value, which we've assumed at $100 for this brand, divided by ad spend. Awesome. Now that this is all together, we now know that with this target acquisition MER, with this target blended CAC, our optimal spend would be somewhere here between $16,000 to $17,000 per month, as that would be right between a 5.9 to a 6.13 acquisition MER, as well as being between our blended CAC targets. However, this is wrong. This is absolutely not what this brand should be spending. And this is where 99% of performance marketers wouldn't know why, because we're hitting the blended targets. Why would we want to spend more, or why would we want to spend less? But what I've done is also decompose this into incremental figures. And so what we have over here is this is how much extra spend takes us from 5 to 6. Well, it's $1,000, so we're spending $1,000 more. Okay, how many extra new customers do we get for that $1,000 in spend? Well, we get 70 new customers. Okay, well now we can just do an acquisition MER and a blended CAC calculation based on these extra customers that we've acquired. So when we go from $5,000 to $6,000 in spend, we get an extra 70 customers and we pay $14.29 per customer, which is also a 7 acquisition MER, which is on target. Perfect. We go down and we add another $1,000. We get to 7K. Perfect. This is also profitable. We're adding 63 more customers to what we're acquiring and we're doing it profitably. But then suddenly we jump to 8K spend and you can see we suddenly drop under that acquisition MER target. And we're now acquiring customers at above our blended CAC target and below our acquisition MER target. This is not something we want to do if we want to be maintaining this level of profit on every single customer that's acquired. So suddenly, this is no longer profitable, and we wouldn't want to spend at this level, and we wouldn't want to spend any lower than this. And so if your target for every single customer was to acquire them at a 6 acquisition MER or acquire them for $16.67, we would want to be spending $7,000. And so you can suddenly see that by looking at a blended figure, you overspend by $10,000 per month. That's 2.5x what you actually should be spending when you decompose it into its increments. Now, what this then allows for is more strategical decision-making about where we should actually set the ad spend level. Now, with this brand, a 6 acquisition MER, this is going to output, let's say, about 40% in contribution margin. let's say that, okay, we want to do a little bit more volume. We're happy not making as much money on these customers. And to make this simpler, let's say that they have $45 in gross profit on these purchases. And so the amount of profit that they're making, and we can literally just put this in here. We can go profit on order, and we can go 45 minus this. We just need to lock this cell in, and we'll now have profit per order. And so we can see when we start acquiring customers unprofitably. So let me move myself out of the way here. And you'll be able to see that once we cross 16 to 17,000, that's when we start losing money on acquiring customers. But as we start to approach here, we start to make very, very little on these orders, to the point of which we have to make the assessment, is it worth acquiring an extra 24 customers and only making $4 in profit on those customers, with all of the relevant operating expenses and periphery expenses that we might incur from actually having to fulfill more volume here? And the answer probably is no. And there's probably a threshold in which we want a minimum profit just so that we could have a barrier of error margin. Very much so might be the case that some orders come from particular postcodes that cost a little bit more to ship to. And very much so might be the case that people use discount codes and we make a little bit less profit than this number. And so if this was to get squeezed by even $5, let's say, well, suddenly this isn't profitable, this is making a few dollars in profit, and this is suddenly only making $5 an order. And so if we apply a error of margin to our profit per order as well, we probably end up landing somewhere here, to where now our adjusted optimal spend level starts to lie between 12 to 13. This is where we'd be comfortable acquiring these incremental customers, as long as we're acquiring them for this incremental blended CAC, and to where we're still actually at least guaranteed making profit on acquiring these individual customers. Now, where you start to get into a lot of trouble is when people use this logic that I've just stepped you through, but they use it at a blended level. It's very rare that people are doing this analysis that we're running you through right now at an incremental level. And so what ends up happening instead is they're doing these profit on order calculations, but they're doing it, and let me move myself again, they're doing it over here. They don't know that this incremental analysis even exists, and so we can just close this off and pretend it doesn't even exist. And they're looking right here, and they're going, well, we're currently spending 16 to 17, and when we run the math, this comes out to about $28 in profit per order. I would be happy to jump up to $20K in spend and acquire an extra 1,000 customers a month and take a hit of $2 per order. That's fine. And most people look at that and they go, yeah, that's okay, $2 in profit per order, but we get way more customers. Okay, those customers might repeat buy. We have a bigger customer database. That might be an exchange that we want. But what they don't realize is when we go over to the incremental side of things, if they go up to $20,000 in spend, the jump from 19 to 20, these customers that are being acquired at a $17 loss. And so what that ends up meaning here is that unless they have an incredibly strong retention and repeat purchase rate, these customers will never drive a profit to the business. And so this is not only, in no strategy does this ever make sense, unless you have an absurd level of repeat purchasing and you're getting a serious lift in profit contribution at a customer level over a 90 to 180 day period. But there are so many brands that I look at and I do this analysis on, particularly just during the preliminary audit stage. And I notice that these top $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 of spend is just acquiring customers. Yes, you're acquiring an extra, how many customers do you have here? 92 customers a month. But you're doing it and accumulating thousands and thousands of dollars of losses in the first-time customer P&L. And it's never going to be recouped in the returning customer P&L because you don't have strong enough lifetime value to be able to even repay this CAC. And so if you're a performance marketer and a clients come to you and they've said, we have a target acquisition MER, we have a target MER, or we have a target blended CAC, whatever the metric might be, of X amount, really think about not just going to that specific amount. Because that's what we tend to do, is it's how much can we spend while still retaining that blended target. But the blended target means nothing without decomposing ad spend into incremental figures. And it's worth noting that this is a relatively clean assumption in terms of the way that this is scaled, where what I've done is that every increment erodes by 90% in terms of the difference of the prior increment. In reality, this isn't what new customer acquisition ends up looking like for most brands, and there's often a slow trail and then a very steep drop-off at some point. And so what this ends up often looking like instead, and let's remove a lot of these lines and get back to the original graphs. What this ends up looking like is at around about, let's say about here, this goes from an 80% drop-off to like a 50% drop-off, because there's a point at which you have saturated your highest quality key terms and customers on Google, or you have saturated your highest quality, warmest audience on Meta, and then you start to get a steep drop-off unless you have creative or strategies that can cut through to completely cold audiences. And so from here, it then ends up looking like this. So from here, let's say this is your actual data, you're going to make an adjustment and you're going to go, well, our optimal spend sits right in this part here. So we should be spending between 13 to 14, as that's right in between the acquisition MER figures. However, once again, go over to the incremental analysis and you'll notice that all of this is losses. All the way from 11K onwards, you're losing money on each individual purchase. And the reason being is there's such poor incremental lift from 10 to 11. You spend an extra $1,000, you only get 13 customers. You then spend an extra $1,000 from 11 to 12, you only get 6 customers. And so there's such a rapid drop off. There's such poor efficiency in this top end spend that there's no point in even spending 13 to 14. You may as well pull all the way back to 9. You'll acquire almost the same amount of customers. Yes, you'll acquire 50 customers less, but in the grand scheme of things, you're acquiring 50 less customers, but you're saving $5,000 per month. And so the 50 customers are definitely not worth $5,000 per month in profit contribution to the business. So this is a really important analysis that you should be looking at. It's quite simple to be able to actually put this together for your own brand, which is that you just need to pull all historical ad spend data, all historical new customers, and then you need to do, and you can do this automatically in a sheet where you go equals average if ad spend is between these thresholds, and then you can average out all the numbers. You'll then need to smooth them a little bit. It'll never come out as clean as you want it to come out. And then you can start to get a better idea for what each increment starts to look like as you move up in scale and where you might need to be pulling back on spend. This also really pushes home the point of doing continuous budget changes to be able to try to measure the incremental change in new customer acquisition. If you're currently spending $14,000 per month and you think that you might be in this situation, well, next month, test pulling to 12. Be very strategical in where you pull the $2,000 out, though. You do not want to pull it from a top-of-funnel campaign that's driving a lot of customer acquisition. Be strategical. Look at those campaigns that might not be driving the best efficiency. Pull the $2,000 out. Have a look at what happens to new customers. Make sure you have a time lag in there as well, because there's obviously a customer journey time delay for all of these customers that are built into the funnel. And you might find that you cut $2,000 out and there's almost no impact at all on new customers. And now that isn't to say that you should then spend $12,000 forever. That's not the conclusion here. The conclusion here is that you had $2,000 in wasted spend. Now you need to go out and find how can you make that $2,000 in spend actually incremental. The solution to scaling a direct-to-consumer e-commerce brand is not to cut spend. And that kind of seems like the conclusion of this video, which is cut spend, everyone's overspending, there's all these losses in incremental customer acquisition. And yeah, that is what I'm saying. But if you just cut spend, you'll just slowly kill your brand and you'll go down to acquiring no customers over time. So the solution isn't to cut spend, it's to do the analysis, figure out, is the top end actually incremental? The answer is probably no. And then it's okay, cool, let's cut it. And then let's add it back in a way that it will be incremental. And then continue adding spend over time that will be incremental. Because if you're just layering in spend and it's not actually driving incremental profit on each order. You're just going to layer losses into the P&L, and you're going to run your business at a 5 to 10% EBITDA when you could just be running it at a 20 to 25% EBITDA, and everything would be the same. And you would be in a much healthier position, both in terms of stress management as well as the longevity of the business, accumulating cash. But instead, you're just running on huge losses being driven into that first-time customer P&L because you're acquiring 10 customers here at a loss of $4,000 per month.